The Round Rock Cheese Factory stood just south of the American Legion Hall on Georgetown Street. The site of the factory is now Consolidated Metal Technologies at 800 Georgetown Street. Built at a cost of $10,000 on nearly the same site as the 1904 Round Rock Creamery, the Round Rock Cheese Factory opened on January 2, 1928, becoming the first successful cheese factory in the state. The plant helped local farmers and businesses weather the Great Depression of the 1930s and a boll weevil infestation of local cotton crops. During the Depression, the cheese factory paid to farmers approximately $15,000 every month and accounted for 2/3 of the total payroll for the town of Round Rock. An estimated 900 families were saved from destitution due to the cheese factory. The plant continued operations until the late 1960s. Originally opened and run by local businessmen Thomas E. Nelson and Carl A. Nelson, Fort Worth-based Armour and Swift Company purchased the factory in January 1930 and undertook extensive expansions, doubling the size of the factory. August Kaufman, who arrived from Wisconsin with 18 years of prior experience in the cheese industry, ran the factory. He left in March 1935 when he received a promotion to regional manager. Later, Elmer Cottrell, who arrived in 1948, managed the factory thereafter and went on to become a city councilman in 1958 and mayor from 1965 to 1968. Work to make the cheese began at midnight with the pasteurization of the milk. When the pasteurized milk reached a temperature of 88 degrees Fahrenheit, enzymes were added to start the coagulation process, forming the curds and whey. Once the soup-like cheese was cooked, a wire blade curd knife was employed to cut through the soon-to-be cheese. Once the whey was drained off, the cheese was stacked one on top of another to further remove excess whey. The cheese-making process took about 5 hours from beginning to end. Next, the cheese was then packaged for local consumption or shipped in 500-pound barrels to Springfield, Missouri, where the Armour Company further reprocessed the cheese into additional food products. Byproducts of the cheese-making process helped the community in other ways. Whey would be drained from the 8 to 10 vats of cheese and pumped into a large overhead vat for the farmers to take for free as hog feed. On very productive cheese-making days, excess whey would overflow and run off into Brushy Creek, fattening the catfish and drawing local anglers near the factory. Unfortunately for the fish and the fishermen, the health department got involved and curtailed dumping excess whey into the creek. Business success came quickly, as between 800 to 1,000 pounds of milk came into the business on the first day of business in January 1928. By late February, a newspaper report mentioned on a recent Saturday, local farmers brought in 5,500 pounds of milk, which the factory converted into 28 cheeses, each weighing 22 pounds or 616 pounds of cheese in total. The farmers received 50 cents per pound for their butter fat as compared to the then current going rate of 32 cents. After almost 18 months of operation, the cheese factory had taken in over 6.2 million pounds of milk and paid farmers $151,572, which would be almost $2.7 million today. By the end of 1929, the cheese factory was receiving 14,000 pounds of whole milk a day and up to 17,000 pounds in spring and summer. The Round Rock Cheese Factory was so lucrative that it became the target of thieves. Within a 2-week period in December 1931, the cheese factory was robbed of cheese twice. One heist totaled 5,000 pounds of missing cheese, while the other robbery netted an additional 2,500 pounds. Fort Worth wholesale dealer L.G. Allred was arrested and charged with receiving and concealing stolen goods. Initially pleading not guilty, he changed his plea to guilty after the testimony of Fort Worth truck driver Earl Neese, who stated that he and a companion broke into the cheese factory and trucked the cheese to Fort Worth, where it was sold to Allred for $350. Allred's fines were $1,000 and court costs, and Neese was sentenced to 2 years on each count for burglary and theft, with the sentences running concurrently. The factory was victimized again in January 1957 when burglars broke in over a weekend and stole no cheese this time, only money. Workers discovered 40 cents missing this time and the cheese untouched. An even sadder note in the history of the cheese factory is that it was the site of the death of a local woman. 19-year-old Kay Dollarhide Gilbert, a secretary working at the state comptroller's office, was found dead in her parked car on the north side of the cheese factory in February 1962. A shotgun was found near her body. The coroner performed an autopsy, and her death certificate stated that the gunshot wound was self-inflicted. Kay Gilbert had graduated from Round Rock High School in 1960 and left behind a husband and young son, as well as her mother and a brother. The cheese factory closed for good in late 1968, as the Round Rock Leader published a short, front-page notice in the November 14, 1968 issue, stating that Elmer Cottrell had announced the closure of the cheese factory. For a time, the old factory building was used as a paint shop. A fire destroyed the building on July 12, 1978.